Hi, welcome back to another video. And today I will once again be talking about the 2026 Georgia Senate race, where we finally now have our first Republican who has now entered the race. House Republican Representative Buddy Carter has now launched his campaign for the Georgia Senate race against Jon Ossoff. Now, Buddy Carter is in the 1st Congressional District of Georgia. He's been a House Republican since 2015. And he released his first campaign ad just about a couple weeks ago here, or very recently. And the ad seemed to be targeting more the primary than the general election itself, but regardless, he is now in this election. And obviously, I think Carter is so far preparing for, more Republicans to jump in this race. Republicans that are probably going to challenge him and that probably win the nomination because Carter's been around for a long time. Maybe others think that he doesn't have it up for the job, especially because big names like Brian Kemp and Marjorie Taylor Greene are no longer, are not going to be participating in this election. And so he knows that. So there's going to be a lot of Republicans jumping in this race that want to challenge Ossoff, that think they have what it takes to defeat the Democratic Senator incumbent Jon Ossoff next year. But I think that we still have a long way to go. Well, we do have a long way to go, and that we are going to be seeing much more Republicans jump in this race. Now, like I said, Buddy Carter is a House Republican for 10 years now. And he's been trying to put out the message that he is a Republican for Trump and that he is very Trumpy, he's very Maggie or MAGA-y, and that he is the Republican that the Republican Georgia voters are going to want to nominate to go against Jon Ossoff. Now, if he is able to do that, we will be seeing much more in the future. But like I said, I predict and I expect to see a lot more Republicans jumping in the race. Buddy Carter was probably just waiting for Kemp and Marjorie Taylor Greene to really, announce their decisions. I don't think that any other Republican would have jumped in the race if Brian Kemp or Marjorie Taylor Greene ran or decided to run. I think they probably would have stayed out of it. Either one of them would have won the primary pretty easily, because Brian Kemp's the popular governor, and Marjorie Taylor Greene has very close ties to MAGA. She's very popular with Trump, and within the Republican Party. So I think either one of them probably would have won the primary very easily. But I think Brian Kemp would have been the only one to really be able to defeat Jon Ossoff. Now, I'm not sure if Buddy Carter would be able to. We still have to wait for some polls to come out. Some head-to-head polls are the ones I like to look for. So we will be seeing any one of those. But he is now in this race. He is now in this race. Representative Buddy Carter of Georgia launched his campaign to challenge Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff in 2026, making the first Republican to jump in the battleground race. Carter billed himself as a MAGA warrior in his campaign announcement video released on Thursday. He declared his commitment to the Trump administration's efforts to secure the border and end transgender athletes' participation in school sports, bashing Ossoff's approach to the issues. So yeah, Republicans are going to try to, or more specifically, Buddy Carter is going to try to really push on the narrative that Jon Ossoff is for trans people and all that stuff Republicans have kind of been bashing in for these past years. If he is able to succeed, push on that narrative, win like Trump did in Georgia. Remember, Trump didn't win Georgia by much. And maybe Buddy Carter has what it takes. But like I said, we have to wait for some polls to come out to really be able to tell, to see if Buddy Carter has what it takes, if he is as strong as a candidate as Brian Kemp would have been, to really be able to defeat Jon Ossoff. But as of right now, I say that Jon Ossoff probably has the momentum. I would have been saying something completely different if Brian Kemp actually jumped in the race, but I think Brian Kemp is probably gearing up for a 2028 presidential campaign bid. But Buddy Carter here, he probably has some potential. He's the first Republican to launch in. He has, time is probably on his side, I'm guessing. And he's an experienced Republican, or House Republican here. In the Georgia 1st District, he won his race by 24 points. Democrat getting 38% of the vote and Carter getting 61%. So he has he can probably use that in a primary challenge if there's a lot of Republicans that try to jump in here saying that, I've been able to win elections before in Georgia and I can win this one in the Senate. You got to nominate me. So we'll see. But like I said, we still have to wait for a lot more of Republicans to jump in this race here. So far, we only have the Reagan box horse trainer, Buddy Carter, and John King. So, and we have a lot of these other ones, so 4 more who have filed paperwork who probably will announce their campaigns here. So there's going to be a lot of Republicans jump in. We also have some expressed interests, maybe some potentials. I doubt Kelly Loeffler, or any of these other people are going to be jumping in. I don't think Doug Collins, possibly. Definitely not Kelly Loeffler or Brad Raffensperger. And then, of course, we have the decline with Andrew Clyde, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Brian Kemp. Governor of Georgia, U.S. Representative, and also U.S. Representative, who is running for re-election in his house. So, yeah, obviously not running for the Senate. And there could be a lot of these candidates who decide, maybe they drop out early and they're going to run for the governor, that could totally happen. Maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to run for governor. That is something she really hasn't talked about, where she said that she didn't want to be in the Senate. She doesn't believe that much work could go on or goes on in the Senate, and she didn't really think it'd have much an effect with the agenda of President Trump and the White House. She believes that doing her best work is in the House. She's been able to vote on a lot of stuff, and she doesn't believe that she'd be effective in the Senate. But I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene may see otherwise as governor. I mean, as governor, you are much more powerful than compared to a representative or a senator. If she runs for governor, I don't know. It's still we have to wait to see who the Democrats, try to choose for the governor. I think if it's Stacey Abrams, she's probably going to lose again. Also, it does depend on who the Republicans put because, like I said, Brian Kemp is ineligible to run for governor, so we'll see. But so far, for the Senate race, so far, since Jon Ossoff announced his campaign, to run for re-election in 2026, so far, out of all the candidates we've seen, right, Brian Kemp, Marjorie Taylor Greene. The only one who's polled to beat him was Brian Kemp, and we only got a couple polls of that. But regardless of Brian Kemp, out of all these other politicians so far, they have not beaten Ossoff in any polls so far. And it looks like so far, ever since Jon Ossoff has really, announced his campaign to run in 2026 for re-election, he really seems to be having the momentum right now and, having really the best chance to win despite being this vulnerable Democrat senator incumbent in this swing state that Trump did not win by much here. Trump defeated Kamala Harris in this state, not by much, in November of 2024, only winning this by 2 points. Remember, he lost this to Biden in a very close margin. Biden only won this by under half a point. 0.2.4%. Very close. And Trump was able to swing this state back in his favor and win it by 2 points. Now, if we compare it to 2016, you can see here that is a much more underperformance than compared to his 2016 victory in Georgia against Hillary Clinton than, in 2024. But Georgia swinging back to Trump was kind of expected. I predicted it to happen. But still, Georgia is a very, very competitive state. There's going to be the governor race and the Senate race, I assume, will also be very competitive. And we'll just have to see how it goes. But yeah, Buddy Carter is now in this campaign, now in this election to, for the Georgia Senate race. And we'll see how many other Republicans, decide to hop in here. Like I said, I think all these Republicans are eventually going to be, declared candidates. And we'll see, which, if they pose any sort of threat to Buddy Carter and see if we get any, primary polls or anything like that. Obviously, the Democrats are not going to challenge Jon Ossoff in any way at all. Jon Ossoff is going to be the only declared Democrat in this race, but we'll see who the Republicans throw in. So this race is getting very, very exciting, and I cannot wait to see more Republican candidates jump in this race. But until then, yeah, it seems like Jon Ossoff has momentum right now. We will have to wait to see some polls. I think Buddy Carter might be this front runner in the Republican primary. He's probably the one so far with the most name recognition, unless Mike Collins jumps in. Mike Collins, another U.S. representative, if he jumps in, could probably be competitive, but we just have to see. But anyways, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in next video. Bye.